Hey everybody, welcome back to the LuckyDog podcast. This is your host, Elias Rouse. This podcast is sponsored by EliasRouseMedia.com, photo, video, digital media production. Today we are discussing a classic. I mean, what is it on? AFI's top 100, IMDb's like top 10, Rotten Tomatoes, obviously this is going to have it through the roof, 97%, 9.2 out of 10 on IMDb. Hell, even Facebook has a 5 out of 5, whatever ratings are on there, whoever goes by that. But today we are discussing 1972, The Godfather, a 2 hour and 55-minute movie directed by Francis Ford Coppola. I think if I look at our library, this is our second. I think this is our second Francis Ford Coppola joint that we've covered. The other one being Apocalypse Now, which just blew my socks off. That was another one I was not ready for. Coppola is one of those that just goes for these big swings and epic tales, and these two movies alone. We're not going to discuss the rest of the Godfather trilogy as of right now, but those two, The Godfather and Apocalypse Now, just blew my socks off. And of course, he's a well-renowned director that has always feels like he's playing catch up, but every time he's playing catch up, he always has just like this, has something amazing to say. Now, whether we are discussing, his Academy Award-winning movies such as The Godfather, Best Picture, Best Actor, Best Adapted Screenplay was shared obviously with the writer Mario Puzo. But he's also released other movies such as The Conversation, which he received the Palme d'Or for at the Cannes Film Festival. His next film was The Apocalypse Now, 1979 war epic. I mean, after seeing what he does with the Godfather 1 and 2, because those come out before Apocalypse Now, it's just, you can see that this guy can tackle something of this magnitude. So yeah, with regards of having just a big strenuous cast, crazy obstacles, just like kind of a nightmare of a scenario to shoot in. It always feels like his productions are always like a hurricane, kind of what they were having to deal with Apocalypse Now, that physical weather and attributes of having to deal with his movie sets just sound kind of like a nightmare on a level. So I'm always interested to see what Francis Ford Coppola is going to bring. So continuing on, this is based off of Mario Puzo's best-selling book, in 1969, the novel of the same title, The Godfather. This film stars Marlon Brando, Al Pacino, James Caan, Richard Castanello, Robert Duvall, Sterling Hayden, John Marley, Richard Conte, and Diane Keaton. It's the first installment in the Godfather trilogy, chronicling the Corleone family under the patriarch Vito Corleone, played by Brando. From 1945, the story takes place, to 1955. It focuses on the transformation of his youngest son, Michael Corleone, played by Pacino, from reluctant family outsider to ruthless mafia boss. And so we'll continue on with some of the details of this movie before we kind of get into more opinions. Paramount Pictures obtained the rights for the novel for $80,000 before it gained popularity. Studio executives had trouble finding a director. The first few candidates turned it down, the position before Coppola signed on to direct the film, but disagreement followed over casting several characters, in particular Vito, who was obviously Brando, and Michael. Filming took place primarily on location around New York City and Sicily and was completed ahead of schedule. The musical score was composed principally by Nino Rota with additional pieces of Carmine Coppola, which I believe is his wife. His brother. I believe that's his. Oh, sorry, that's not that's his father. His father composed additional pieces. Sorry. Um, The Godfather premiered at Lowell's State Theater on March 14th, 1972, and was widely released in the United States on March 24th, 1972. It was the highest grossing film of 1972 and was, for a time, the highest grossing film ever made, earning between 250 and 290 million at the box office. And this was done on an approximate budget of 6 to 7 million. Now, there's like a disagreement apparently about how much this movie actually cost, but 6 to 7 million doesn't sound too crazy for about how much this movie made, which uh, is incredible. 250 to 290 is just like that's crazy on that budget. Um, the film was well received by critics and audiences who praised its performances, particularly those of Brando and Pacino. The direction, screenplay, writing, story, cinematography, editing, score, portrayal of the mafia, even though there's a lot of things that they actually got wrong actually in the book, and there's a lot of logistical things that is actually wrong in the movie, but actually the Italian mob has modeled themselves loosely off of, or immediately after, in the 70s and 80s, they were kind of modeling themselves after this movie that was actually factually wrong in some of the more important parts. And so I thought that was kind of interesting how the art uh, is trying to intimidate life, but it's actually turning like the other way around, even though it was wrong the first time. Um, so yeah, I pretty much agree with 100% about that. The fact is, this movie feels like you're dropped into a world that is extremely lived in. You're not, if you're not based in the Italian mafia, you would probably think that this is almost documentary light. It does feel like the way that Francis Ford Coppola is filming this movie. It's almost like he just has a tripod chilling, and occasionally he'll zoom in on some characters, and there'll be like very interesting conversations. And obviously, the cinematography in it is very impressive for what the type of media literacy they had back then. But it does honestly feel like you're just dropped in like these family moments and these family scenes, and it all feels so lived in. The Godfather himself reminds me very much of my Jewish grandfather, who kind of is like, has the patriarchal feel of the family, and very much everyone, kind of circles him when there's all the family stuff going on. And it, back in the day, I don't remember my grandfather being as young, I think, as uh, the Godfather is in this, but um, yeah, I think Godfather's maybe in his 60s. I don't have an approximate year for how old he is in this, but maybe in his 60s, 70s. But my grandfather's 100 years old right now. So, um, as I'm recording this, that's I just I'm not even 30 yet, so I don't remember when he was that young. But I digress. I can relate to having the big family dynamics of this. Obviously, we're not doing any of this mafia stuff, but the way that the family kind of can fold into, you know, making sure the older generation and appeasing the older generation is very common. I'd say not just in Italian, um, you know, households, but many households. And I know that Japanese culture, I believe, is very similar. Um, but yeah, I enjoy the hell out of this movie, mostly from it feels kind of like a three-act structure in a way that it's kind of episodic. In a way it feels like a mini series, like the first hour, second hour, third hour, which is ironic that I was actually not really bashing against, but Oppenheimer is a 3 hour solid movie, and we're going place to place, people were talking this, that, and the other's happening, but it feels like so much longer of a movie in comparison to this the Godfather movie, which it feels very much like there might be uh, one or two main places that our characters are staying in within an hour, but it gives time for there to be life within this film. I know I'm kind of basically what I'm saying is like, even though it's like super super serious. There might be an intense conversation between like one of the hit guys and one of the mob guys, and Brando, Don Corleone, and he's one of the mob guys is sitting there quivering, trying to talk to the Godfather, and a little child will run into the frame and kind of uh, break the tension in a way, but in a way that it feels so lived in. It feels like, of course, there would be kids everywhere. There would be life everywhere. I mean, I remember at a certain age that there was just like 12 kids in our at our beach house, and there was nowhere you could get where there weren't kids screaming or yelling or having fun or whatever. When you have these big chaotic families, that's what tends to happen. And I felt like it was small moments that everyone is gonna hip check. They're gonna quote some of the best lines, like uh leave the gun, take the cannoli. That's some gold right there. um and uh and even it scenes like showing us like the recipe of like the meatballs and everything like that, throw the wine in. We sit there for 2 minutes and we're having like a conversation on how to make an authentic Italian recipe. And when I was first watching this, like The Godfather, this movie feels like it is the director's cut. It feels like you're watching the extended edition. But the movie is so good that you want to watch the extended edition every time. So the I guess what I'm saying is, if you got something really good, then leaving some of these, chunkier parts in. This movie is better because it has those chunkier parts. These are not flaws. These are not bugs. These are features. The recipes, the sitting down for 2 minutes, the the we're at this wedding for easily, I think it's probably 20 minutes of the first little bit of this movie, but it gives us so much time to interact and sit down and understand all of these characters, um, and all of these players. Even Michael, you kind of see how he's kind of removed from the family, anything from, and then Duvall's Hagen's character, and you kind of the first 15 minutes of this movie. I know I'm kind of going, kind of. I think I'm breaking it down a little bit too much, but what I'm saying is it's so well structured and well paced and well like executed. It's like the first 15 minutes set up everything you need to know about basically the entire family, how it functions, how it's running, how the world works, even how the director is going to show you, different parts of this family, in having an old grandpa up there doing phallic gestures and dancing and singing and all that with the matriarch of the family, uh Mrs. Godmother or something. But I I am just I'm kind of floored by how well it's paced just by starting it up. and you're almost immediately into the action. And it does kind of feel like it's paced episodically, very much differently from, I know I'm going to try to stray away from the other two Godfather movies, but basically, The Godfather 2 feels way more like two movies put together, and then Godfather 3 is back to like the three act structure again, in my opinion. So, yeah, the screenplay and everything for this, basically everything from direction to the casting to the execution of this movie is done to such a high level, to the point where it feels like you're at an authentic Italian family wedding. You're in an authentic Italian family. You're like introduced. Yeah, you're in the family. Dom Toretto is going to pop out of nowhere. Um, so yeah, and so cinematography was done by Gordon Willis, cinematographer and film director. Known, he's done a lot of work with Woody Allen, uh, Alan J. Polka, James Bridge, and all three films for Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather series, which is interesting because I think this is the best looking one. I know some people might say Godfather 2 might be the superior movie, but Godfather 1 is the one I'm going to repeat, go back to every time. Minor spoiler, I guess. Okay, so let's see. What else do we got to cover on here? Da-da-da-da-dun, da-da-dun. And again, we're streaming live on Twitch right now at Look It Up Podcast. Be sure to check out lookitoutpodcast.com for all of our links and descriptions, and anything you need to know regarding the podcast can be found there and is in the description as well. So, what else do we have? Okay, so The Godfather launched the successful careers of Coppola, Pacino, and relative newcomers in the cast and crew. The film also revitalized Brando's career, which had declined in the 1960s, and he went on to star in successful films later, such years as Last Tango in Paris, Superman, and Apocalypse Now. At the 45th Academy Awards, the film won the Best Picture, Best Actor for Brando, and Best Adapted Screenplay, Puzo and Coppola. In addition, the 7 other Oscar nominations included Pacino, Conn, Duvall, all for Best Supporting Actor, and Coppola for Best Director. The Godfather is regarded as one of the greatest and most influential films ever made, as well as a landmark of the gangster genre. It was selected for preservation in the U.S. National Film Registry of the Library of Congress in 1990, and being deemed culturally, historically, and aesthetically significant, and is ranked the second greatest film in American cinema behind Citizen Kane by the AFI. It was followed by Godfather Part 2, 1974, and Godfather Part 3 in 1990, which respectively had what feels like completely different, um wheels to the engine, wheels to the car. Every single movie that follows the original Godfather feels like it loses a little piece of what made the first one special. Again, all in my opinion. So, like I said, it's a runtime of 175 minutes. It's a chunky boy, but the way that it's divided up, basically 3 different hours, and you get 3 solid, what feels like act structures within those hours, that makes it feel like it just goes, goes, goes. And so, from the quotability to the fact that you might laugh, you might cry, you might uh what is it, everything, you might just implode. I don't know. I can't think of all the emotions off the top of my head right now, but um this movie makes you feel the things. It makes you feel the feels. And almost as soon as it goes off, I want to turn it back on because of either how funny it is or how much I enjoyed a scene or how quotable some people are. It almost feels like each scene is a little bit of catnip. I'm like, ooh, this is good. Ooh, this is better flavor. Ooh, but different types of layers and flavors because the way the story completely ratchets up and kind of hits a pinnacle or a climax to it, so to speak. It's it's extremely watchable and entertaining from that value. And if you want to do a small comparison to the other two are way less accessible and fun. Now, not from the quality of like the story of what happens through the rest of the story, but I don't necessarily think you need the rest of the Godfather trilogy. If it had stopped at just the Godfather, you could almost guess if you've watched this movie what would happen to the end of this family at the end, which is actually kind of interesting having seen, you know, uh, Scorsese's Casino, Scorsese's Goodfellas. Goodfellas was 1990, I believe. So let me check real quick. Yeah, that was 1990, and I believe that the Goodfellas movie had stolen a little bit of the thunder of Godfather 3. Hold on, let me see, Godfather 3. Okay, so yeah, okay, so Goodfellas came out in September 19th, 1990. Um, made 47 million. And then Godfather 3 came out the same year, $54 million budget. It came out on December, Christmas Day, 25th, 1990. So yeah, I think what a lot of people had said was they were just comparing the two mafia movies. I mean, how couldn't you at a certain point? But and I believe there was talk that Scorsese was going to do one of the Godfather movies, but backed out to whatever reason. If I can find it, I'll be sure to mark it in. But uh, yeah, it kind of makes sense. And when you watch the Godfather series, even watching the first one, you can see that this is not a sustainable lifestyle, to say the least. So, um, yeah. So let's continue on. And again, if you have any questions, hop in the chat. If so, you're on VOD, YouTube, whatever you're watching on, pop it on there, and we'll get back to you in the aftercast. Aftercasts are when we normally have the responses to all of our podcasts. Okay, so let's hop into the spoiler section for The Godfather. Let me uh, clarify anything real quick before we get in the spoiler section. Just real quick, 30 seconds. Basically, it is one of the greatest movies of all time. It is a little bit, I guess, masculine driven in some points where you would say that I could I could say that there's a lot of toxic masculinity going on, but to the point of it feels authentic to what these families actually go through, and families like this, not just Italian families, but families of this nature where they have the overarching patriarch that is kind of controlling things, not just within the family but outside the family, the friends, the family, the neighbors, the community. They got their hands in everything. And so there is elements to this story being the authentic immigrant story too, which I'm not gonna talk too much about the comparisons, like I said, but yeah, a lot of people would say that there's a lot of Americana values or iconography type uh, feelings in this movie and in this trilogy that can be relatable to multiple generations of probably just a lot of different types of ethnicities um, out there. So Anything else we need to discuss about this? Gave it a 9 out of 10. It's essentially a perfect movie, even with some of the fat on it. And when I said the fat, I mean like these scenes that easily could have been cut up a little bit. It could have been a faster movie. I mean, just movies in general in the 70s were slower, but on top of that, they're having like conversations that feel like they didn't have to have all the time. Um, but I do like the shagginess of this movie, and it kind of makes it does make it feel more authentic. Um, but there, like I said, there's one or two parts about the middle half of this movie, I believe, that probably would have been better served as a television show, in my opinion, just because even though it's 3 hours, it almost needs to be 3.5 hours because there is probably a 20-minute revenge plot, multiple revenge plots that probably need to be resolved a lot faster than just doing it off screen. I mean, there is a large chunk of things that are resolved off screen, and given that it is coming from Puzo's novel, you can probably just jump into Puzo's novel and see what you actually missed. You know how so and so was hunted down or something like that. But um, but yeah, this is this is an entertaining ass movie, and I think maybe what people would want to know: should you watch the rest of the Godfather trilogy? Obviously, I think you should watch number two because number two is up there. Known, it's one of the best sequels of in cinema. So I think that obviously number two should be watched. But number three, number three. So the reason I think you should watch number three, if you're a cinephile, I obviously think you should watch number three. You need to understand where the wheels ran off the road or something like that, or if they even did. I haven't even exactly given my full opinion on three. Um, is it even comparable to eight? Sorry, is it even comparable to one and two, Godfather Part One and Two? In my opinion, no. Part three feels like it is the general mafia movie that probably uh, people were thinking that The Godfather was going to be, and so what happens is part three becomes more more generic, and the way that it's executed in comparison to the first two authentically shot and well thought out, planned out movies. You know, three feels like it's a cash grab, um, and a little bit spiteful, I guess. I don't know. It's hard to kind of describe three without going into too many plot spoilers and everything like that. But basically, three is quoted a lot more than I would have thought. A lot of people quote three, probably not even knowing that they're quoting Godfather 3. Um, like I think I was for a while, but anyways, yeah, if you're a cinemaphile, if you really want to know what happens at the end of this, uh, I would recommend watching three. If you just want to watch The Godfather 1 and, kind of imagine what happens in the rest of the films, I'd say, yeah, I think you would be completely set doing that just as well. I feel like my time is more valuable than watching lesser than movies. I can understand that. So just stick with The Godfather and two if you can, but only if you're a real cinephile and a completist, then do that third one. Um, but yeah, and it's not a people might be like, oh, it's the worst thing I've ever seen. It's just not AFI top 100 movie. It's just there's just a lot of flaws in three that have happened. So, anyways, let's get back to the spoilers for The Godfather, and yeah, pop it up, pop it up, pop it up, pop it up. I will say there's some really great podcasts on Apple and Spotify and all these other. Uh, what was it? The Rewatchables have a great Godfather podcast. They did 1, 2, and 3, I believe. I think it was Unspooled with Paul Scheer and Amy Nicholson. I think they they have a great Godfather podcast. Bald Move, great Godfather podcast. These are three podcasts I was listening to before starting this one. I wanted to try to ingest as much behind the scenes um, footage as I possibly could with regards to audio footage, I guess. I wanted to listen to as much as I could before doing the podcast. I was actually pretty intimidated by doing the Godfather podcast. I think there's just so much information that is needed to be, you know, explained, portrayed, etc. And um, these big AFI top 100 movies are kind of intimidating sometimes because you're like, damn, am I going to get everything? Am I going to get everything? So, last 2 days I've had the Godfather just replaying in the background so I can have it a little bit more visually rich in my head. So let's start the spoilers for The Godfather 1972. Again, if you are watching on the VOD, you are going to be getting a condensed version for this podcast, and the full version is available on patreon.com/LuckyDog Podcast. Links are provided in the description as well as LuckyDog Podcast.com.